The message arrived on a quiet morning when most people on Earth were busy with ordinary things. Some were going to work, some were making breakfast, and others were checking the sky like they always did, never expecting anything unusual. But in one of the deep space listening stations, a signal came in so strong and so strange that the entire room froze. The sound was not like anything humans had received before. It was calm, steady, clear, and made with a confidence that suggested the sender believed it was speaking to someone smaller, weaker, and far behind in power. The staff replayed the signal again and again. Even before translating it, they could feel it carried a heavy tone, almost like someone giving an announcement rather than opening a conversation. As soon as the computers finished decoding it, the truth spread like wildfire. It was a message sent by a galactic empire far beyond human borders. The translation was short, almost frighteningly simple. They warned humanity to stop expanding beyond its solar system. They talked as if Earth was a small campfire in the dark, and they were a great storm rolling across the sky. They wanted humans to stay contained, stay small, stay quiet. Within hours, every government leader on Earth was alerted. Emergency meetings started. News channels scrambled to get the story out. People all over the world felt a rush of fear, confusion, and disbelief. Many asked how such a powerful civilization found Earth. Others asked why they were sending warnings instead of greetings. Some panicked, thinking the empire might attack at any moment. Social media filled with everything from jokes to prayers to desperate questions about what would happen next. But inside the human fleet command, the reaction was different. The people there were used to handling tension and pressure. They had trained for unknown threats for many years. Some of them had expected a moment like this to come sooner or later. Instead of panicking, they watched the message again and again, studying every detail. They noticed the tone. They noticed the choice of words. And most importantly, they noticed what was not said. The empire warned, but they did not attack. They threatened, but they also hesitated. That hesitation meant something important. They were not certain. And when someone powerful hesitates, it means there is room to respond. Inside the command center, a group of high-ranking officers watched the hologram replay. The gigantic symbol of the empire floated above the table, glowing in red and silver. A tall figure in ceremonial armor spoke through the projection. His voice was controlled and sharp. He said humanity had crossed into regions that belonged to the empire. He said the empire had rules about expansion. He said Earth must return to its own system and avoid crossing those lines again. When the message ended, there was a long silence in the room. Everyone could feel the pressure in the air. The silence wasn't from fear. It was from careful thinking. The officers were already planning. They knew Earth's history. They knew humanity never reacted well to being told to stay small. And they knew that behind the public fears, there was something else. Humanity had a collection of secrets, deep projects, advanced work, strange discoveries, and technologies not publicly announced. There had been stories for years about unusual fragments found near the edge of the solar system, pieces of objects that didn't match any known material, engines being tested far away from crowded planets, quiet missions to study strange energy signatures. None of these were public, but inside the fleet command, these details were as normal as morning briefings. One officer, calm and steady, leaned forward and said what many were already thinking. The empire didn't know the full picture. They didn't know how hard humans had been working. They didn't know how quickly humans adapted. And most of all, they didn't understand human determination. The empire saw Earth as young and inexperienced, but they had misjudged the spirit behind that small blue planet. While most people outside feared the worst, a new plan began forming in the command center. It wasn't a plan of war. No one wanted a conflict. But it was a plan to respond with strength, not fear. Humanity had never been the type to shrink away. Even in the most difficult times, humans found a way to stand tall. The Fleet Command wanted to send a message back not with threats, but with something far more powerful. A demonstration of progress, unity, and capability. Over the next few days, more details about the Empire became known through additional signals and data scans. The Empire was ancient. They controlled hundreds of worlds. Their ships were massive. Their technology was advanced. Many leaders on Earth felt overwhelmed hearing these facts. Some recommended slowing down exploration. Others recommended sending a humble reply. A few even suggested closing all space projects until the Empire seemed satisfied. But not everyone agreed. Many scientists and explorers argued that stopping human progress would mean giving up the very things that made humanity strong. Curiosity, courage, and the need to grow had pushed humans through every era of their history. They had faced impossible challenges before: storms, disasters, wars, and deep struggles, and every time they found a way to push forward. Those voices were important. They reminded the decision-makers that humanity was not a fragile species. It was a species that fought for survival, worked for dreams, and believed in reaching beyond the limits placed on them. The Empire may have been powerful, but power alone did not make them right. Inside the Fleet Command, a smaller team was formed. Their task was to prepare humanity's answer. They were told to think deeply, plan carefully, and show a side of humanity that the Empire had not expected. These people worked quietly, away from the media and public noise. They went through archived data, checked the readiness of new ships, confirmed the status of experimental engines, and studied recent discoveries. Some of these discoveries were incredible. A ship had successfully completed a long-range jump using a new kind of drive. A hidden research outpost had cracked the pattern behind exotic particles found near a strange nebula. A deep space survey team had returned with proof of unusual tunnels in space-time. These were things humanity had not shared with the rest of the galaxy, not even with their nearest neighbors. The team knew they had something valuable. Not weapons, but knowledge and innovation. Something that could shift the balance of fear. Something that could make the Empire rethink its position. They didn't want to scare anyone, but they wanted to show that humanity was not a small campfire flickering in the dark. Humanity was a rising light, growing stronger every year. Meanwhile, on Earth, ordinary people discussed the situation everywhere, in markets, in schools, in buses, in small shops. Some were scared. Some were excited. Some wondered if this could be a new chapter for the planet. But no matter what people felt, everyone understood one thing clearly. Humanity had reached a point where turning back was no longer possible. Humans had built colonies. Humans had entered deep space. Humans had found worlds worth exploring. The future was out there, waiting. The warning from the Empire could not erase all those efforts. As days passed, the fear slowly began to change into something else: determination. Humans were used to rising during hard times, and they trusted that their fleet, their scientists, and their leaders would not let them down. By the end of that week, humanity was ready to respond. They were prepared to travel to the coordinates the Empire had given. They would go with calm hearts, steady minds, and a message that carried everything that made humans who they were. The Empire had issued their warning, but humanity was preparing something different. It was not a threat. It was not surrender. It was a message of identity, courage, and the quiet strength of a species that refused to stay small. In the days after the Empire's warning shook Earth, the human Fleet Command moved quietly but quickly. While the rest of the world argued, worried, and searched for answers, the people inside the command center focused on one thing: preparation. They knew the Empire had power, but they also knew that fear alone could not guide humanity's future. If humans wanted to stand tall, they needed a smart, strong response. Not a reckless one, not an angry one. A response that showed who they truly were. A group of skilled people gathered in a secure meeting room inside Fleet Command. The room had no windows, thick walls, and long holographic screens on every side. The lights were low, and the air carried a quiet seriousness. These were some of Earth's best thinkers, engineers, pilots, strategists, and scientists who had spent years working on hidden projects. They were not famous. They didn't appear on news channels. But they were the backbone of humanity's real progress. The message was simple. They were not preparing for war. They were preparing to show the Empire a truth the Empire did not expect. The first part of their plan was to review everything humanity had built in the last few decades. When they opened the classified files, even the people in the room felt a sense of pride. Humanity had grown faster than any outside observer could guess. The public saw the normal space missions, the deep space telescopes, and the small colonies. But they didn't see the hidden research stations at the edge of the system. They didn't see the quiet missions into unexplored areas. They didn't see the experiments that pushed the limits of physics. One of the engineers activated a hologram showing a sleek vessel rotating in the air. It was unlike the old heavy ships humans once used. It was smooth, almost alive in shape, built for speed and silent travel. The engine glowed faint blue in the image, sending a soft ripple through the room. This ship had made a long-range jump just weeks earlier, jumped so fast that the Empire's warning message might not have even known such technology existed on Earth. The team studied the data. The jump was controlled. The engine held stable. There were no safety failures. That meant the human fleet could use these ships in their meeting with the Empire. Not for battle, but for presence. Showing one advanced ship could shift the entire balance of perception got another scientist pulled up a hologram of something more mysterious. Floating above the table was a fragment, dark, sharp, glowing faintly with small patterns. This piece had been found drifting near the far edge of the solar system. It didn't match any known material. It didn't belong to any known civilization humans had encountered. Researchers had spent years studying it, and recently they had cracked a strange energy signature embedded inside. That new knowledge helped humans build better engines and shields. The Empire, powerful as it was, did not know humans had discovered such things. The Fleet Command wanted to keep many secrets hidden, but showing a controlled sample of humanity's growth could help remind them and the Empire that humans were not as simple as they appeared. Next, they opened files about the deep space survey teams. These teams had explored unknown regions where the Empire rarely visited. They found unusual space-time tunnels and strange magnetic pathways that allowed faster travel under specific conditions. These discoveries were not fully understood yet, but they showed one thing clearly: humanity's instinct to explore had opened doors the Empire had not expected them to open. The team inside the room discussed everything carefully. They knew they couldn't reveal too much. If they showed all their secrets, the Empire might feel threatened. If they showed nothing, the Empire might see them as weak. The message had to be balanced, strong enough to earn respect, but calm enough to avoid conflict. After hours of discussion, they created their main goal. When the human fleet traveled to the meeting point, they would arrive in formation, using a mix of older ships and a few advanced ones. The Empire would see the older ships and think humanity was still catching up. But then they would see the advanced vessels, a quiet reminder that Earth was not as behind as the Empire believed. The next challenge was communication. How would humanity speak to the Empire? Not in anger, not in fear, but with clarity. They began drafting a message meant to show the Empire that humans were expanding not to conquer, but to survive, to learn, and to grow. Every word had to be chosen carefully. Every sentence had to feel honest. Humans had made mistakes in the past, just like any other species. But they were also capable of incredible unity when faced with something larger than themselves. While the team worked, pilots across the fleet trained non-stop. They practiced maneuvers in silent dark regions of space. They tested engines, checked shields, and studied the Empire's known ship designs. Most pilots weren't scared. They were focused. They believed in the mission. They believed that humanity had the right to stand in the galaxy without being ordered to kneel. One of the pilots, known for sharp reflexes and calm judgment, spent hours running simulations of the upcoming meeting. The Empire's ships would be huge, towering like floating mountains. Their movement patterns were predictable but intimidating. The pilot reminded the others that confidence didn't mean arrogance. Their goal was not to challenge the Empire, but to show steady presence. Meanwhile, on Earth, Fleet Command exchanged secret messages with the colonies. They needed everyone aligned. The colonies responded with support. Many of the colonists were everyday people workers, families, technicians, who had built homes on distant planets. They didn't want to give up everything, because an outside force told them to stop. Their messages were filled with hope and trust. They believed Earth would protect them. Those messages strengthened the team. They realized the meeting wasn't just for Earth. It was for every human living under distant suns, every explorer who dreamed of reaching new regions, every child who would grow up in a future shaped by decisions made now. As preparations moved forward, the team revisited the Empire's message again. They listened to it slowly, paying attention to the pauses, the tone, the confidence. One interesting detail stood out. The Empire did not ask humans to submit. They asked them to limit themselves. That meant the Empire was not fully certain about humanity's abilities. If they believed humans were harmless, they would have ignored them. If they believed humans were too dangerous, they might have attacked. But the Empire chose a warning, not destruction. That meant they wanted control without conflict. And that gave humans room to respond with dignity. Fleet Command slowly formed a final plan. The human fleet would travel to the coordinates provided by the Empire. They would bring a diplomatic team, a scientific delegation, and a small squad of elite pilots. They would also bring 2 advanced ships, hidden among the formation, revealed only at the right moment that the journey itself was important. The fleet had to move in a way that looked organized, disciplined, and professional. Galactic powers respected structure. A messy formation would make humans look inexperienced. A strong formation would send a message before anyone even spoke. The final days before departure were tense but hopeful. Engineers made last checks. Scientists sealed their research data. Pilots prepared their suits. Fleet Command officers reviewed the message again, refining every point. The world watched quietly, waiting. People didn't know all the details, but they trusted that humanity would not bow down. On the night before departure, something unexpected happened. Across Earth, many people stepped outside to look at the sky. They didn't coordinate it. It wasn't planned. But in many cities, small towns, and remote villages, people raised their eyes and whispered small wishes for safety. It was a simple human moment, but it reminded everyone why the mission mattered. Humanity didn't want to fight. Humanity didn't want to run. Humanity wanted a future where they could grow without fear. The next morning, the fleet gathered near the outer edge of the solar system. The ships lined up, engines humming softly. Each ship carried people with hopeful hearts and strong minds. The advanced vessels stayed silent, their surfaces dark, waiting for the moment they would be revealed. From the command deck, the order was given. The fleet activated engines. Light rippled through space. The ships moved forward in perfect formation, heading to the meeting point where the Empire expected them. The Empire had issued a warning, but humanity was bringing something else: confidence. Without arrogance, strength without violence, and a message shaped by decades of hard work and deep unity. The journey to the meeting point felt longer than any human mission before it, even though the ships were moving faster than most people on Earth could imagine. The fleet traveled through dark, open space where no sunlight reached, only the soft glow of distant stars. Inside every ship, the atmosphere was calm but serious. Everyone understood that this meeting could change the future of humanity. Some felt nervous, some felt confident, but all of them felt a strong sense of purpose. The meeting point given by the Evo Empire was near a fading red star on the edge of an empty region. The star was dying slowly, giving off a dim, tired glow. The color of the star spread through space like a rusty fog, giving the whole area a strange, quiet feeling. It felt like standing at the border between two worlds unknown. One unknown dot. As the human fleet approached, the pilots adjusted the formation. The ships lined up in clean rows, their lights steady, their movements smooth. This was not just a routine maneuver. It was part of the message: discipline, confidence, organization. The Empire needed to see these things before any words were spoken. The two advanced ships were kept slightly behind the main formation, their surfaces dark and their engines silent at first glance. They blended with space, looking almost invisible. They would be revealed only when the moment was right. Inside the command ship, the officers studied the surrounding area carefully. There were no asteroid fields, no planets, no debris, just empty space and the weak red light from the dying star. But the instruments detected something ahead. Something big. Slowly, shapes began to appear in the distance. At first they looked like dark shadows, but as the fleet got closer, those shadows grew into massive structures. The Empire had arrived early. Their ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen up close. They were gigantic, floating like dark mountains in the void. Their surfaces were made of materials that absorbed light, giving them a silent, intimidating presence. The human pilots grew quiet as they watched the Empire's vessels. Even from a distance, it was clear how advanced the Empire's engineering was. Their ships were built for long journeys, strong shields, and powerful weapons, but they were also built with the confidence of a civilization that had ruled the stars for a very long time. Inside the command ship, someone whispered that the Empire's vessels didn't look like warships. They looked like symbols of authority. The officers agreed. The Empire didn't need to show weapons. Their size alone carried a message. As the human fleet reached the exact coordinates, they slowed down and held position. The Empire's ships shifted slightly, forming a wide semicircle around the meeting area. It did not feel like an attack. It felt like they were taking their place as observers, waiting to see what humanity would do. For several long minutes, nothing happened. No messages, no movements, just silence. The silence was heavy, but the humans held their formation without shaking. It was a test, and they knew it. The Empire wanted to see if humanity would freeze, panic, or break formation. But the fleet stayed steady, engines humming softly like calm breathing. Then, without warning, a bright, sharp beam of pale blue light shot out from one of the Empire's ships. It wasn't an attack. It was a communication beam. The light stretched across space and formed a hologram in the empty region between the two sides. A tall figure appeared. The same armored figure who had delivered the warning to Earth. His face was partly covered, and his voice carried a deep echo, as if it came from a large chamber. He spoke in a language humans didn't understand at first, but their translation systems worked quickly. His voice filled every ship in the fleet. He said the Empire acknowledged humanity's arrival. He said they still expected Earth to follow the rules of expansion. His tone was calm, but there was no warmth in it. He spoke like someone used to being a maid without question out inside the human ships. No one responded right away. They waited. The fleet command needed the right moment to speak. The human officers listened to every word carefully. They noticed the Empire's tone felt slightly different. Less sharp. More curious. That meant the Empire was aware this meeting might not go exactly how they expected. After the Empire's representative finished speaking, the human fleet activated their own communication beam. A clear, steady light formed a hologram of Earth, not a symbol, but the planet itself rotating slowly. The oceans, the clouds, the continents, everything was shown. It was a peaceful image, intentionally chosen. The hologram then shifted to show humans working together, farming, building, exploring, families, students, workers, scientists, ordinary people living ordinary lives. The message was simple: humanity did not expand out of greed. Humans expanded because exploration was a part of who they were. And the hologram showed something else: the human colonies. They weren't grand or luxurious. They were simple but full of hope. People planting new crops on different worlds. Engineers fixing equipment. Children playing near small domes. This was humanity's truth. They weren't building an empire. They were building homes. The Empire's ships remained silent. But the humans could almost feel their curiosity rising. Finally, the hologram displayed one more thing: the human fleet itself. The older ships. The mid-range ships. And then, slowly, it revealed the two advanced vessels that had been hidden behind the formation. They moved forward slightly, their surfaces shimmering with a smooth metallic glow. Their engines activated, showing a soft ripple of blue light. Not angry, not threatening, just a display of capability, calm and controlled. Inside the Empire's ships, there was movement. Scanners activated. Data was exchanged. It was clear the Empire had not expected to see such technology on Earth. Their hesitation showed through small shifts in their formation. The human officers noticed. They knew the moment was changing. After the hologram ended, the human fleet stayed quiet. They did not brag. They did not challenge. They simply held position, letting the message settle. The Empire's representative reappeared. This time, his voice had a different tone. Still firm, still proud, but now mixed with something else: respect, or at least the beginning of it. He asked how humanity had achieved such progress in such a short time. He asked how humans had built those engines. He asked how they had formed stable colonies so far away. The human fleet responded with honesty. Not every secret was revealed, but they explained that humanity had faced countless challenges in its history. Challenges that forced them to innovate, adapt, and create. They explained that humans didn't expand to threaten anyone. They expanded because growth was a part of their survival. Listened. The dying red star pulsed weakly behind them, as if watching the conversation like a silent witness. Slowly, the tension in the air began to soften. The Empire's ships hovered quietly, no longer in a strict defensive posture. They seemed to be observing humanity not as a threat, but as a rising force that deserved a place in the galaxy. The human fleet maintained discipline. Their formation didn't break. Their engines stayed steady. Their silence was strong, not weak, and in that strange, quiet region near the dying star, something important happened. The Empire started to see humanity not as a small species needing limits, but as a determined presence that would not be pushed back. The meeting was not over yet, but humanity had passed the first test. The moment the Empire's representative asked how humanity had grown so quickly, the atmosphere around the meeting point changed. It was small, almost invisible, but every human officer could feel it. The Empire was no longer looking at them as an inconvenience. They were trying to understand them. And when someone powerful starts asking questions, It means they are no longer certain of their own assumptions. But even with this small shift, the humans knew they had to stay careful. The Empire had ruled the stars for centuries. They didn't give up control easily. This conversation could still turn in any direction, positive or dangerous. Every word mattered. Every action mattered. And every second could shape the future. The human fleet's communication beam activated again. The officer chosen to speak appeared as a calm hologram in front of the Empire's ships. He wasn't dressed in anything flashy or intimidating. He wore a simple uniform, standing with a steady posture. His voice was even respectful and completely human. He explained that humanity didn't grow because of ancient power or superior technology. They grew because of pressure and need. Their planet had gone through disasters, conflicts, near collapses, and struggles that pushed people to innovate. Humans learned to solve problems quickly because their survival often depended on it. That skill-quick adaptation was something the Empire never expected. The Empire listened silently. And for the first time, the humans noticed something interesting. The Empire's ships shifted slightly, as if adjusting their position out of respect rather than authority. Inside the command ship, the crew felt a quiet sense of encouragement. They were not trying to win a battle. They were trying to build a bridge. The officer continued and explained more. He spoke about how humans had always looked at the night sky with hope, how exploring the unknown was a part of their nature, how every generation wanted to go further than the last. He said humans were not expanding to challenge anyone. They were expanding because they wanted to understand the galaxy, not own it. He ended the message with a simple line. Humanity grows because growth is in our nature, but growth does not mean hostility. When the message ended, space went silent again. The dying red star flickered in the distance, casting a faint red glow across the fleets. The Empire's representative appeared once more. But this time, his posture had changed. He no longer stood tall with cold authority. His stance relaxed a little, as if considering the human officer's words carefully. He said the Empire respected growth, but they feared reckless expansion. He explained that many young civilizations had risen quickly, only to collapse into chaos or cause destruction across nearby systems. The Empire had seen too many small species grow fast and then lose control of their power. To them, humanity looked like another example dot when the representative spoke. His voice carried weight. He said the Empire had laws for a reason. They wanted to protect the galaxy from instability. They wanted to prevent conflict before it started. And they believed Earth needed guidance. The Empire's tone was not cruel, it was protective. They saw themselves as guardians, not conquerors. Inside the human fleet, the officers understood something important in that moment. This was not about domination. This was about fear of losing control, fear of repeating history, fear of encountering another civilization that might disrupt the balance of the galaxy. The humans now knew what they had to do. They needed to prove not only that they were advancing, but that they were responsible. The officers activated a new hologram. This time, it showed the long history of human cooperation. Earth's nations working together after disasters. Colonists sharing resources on harsh planets. Scientists fixing dangerous problems that affected entire regions. Humans helping each other across cultures, languages, and backgrounds. It wasn't perfect. Humanity had made mistakes. But the message was clear. They improved every time. The Empire watched in silence again. Their ships floated still, no longer forming a strict wall. They seemed to be listening closely. Then something unexpected happened. A second hologram appeared beside the Empire's representative. It was not a message from the Empire. It was a side transmission from a different ship, one of their smaller vessels. On it stood a figure who looked younger than the armored representative. He looked curious, almost intrigued. He spoke before the main representative could stop him. He said he had been monitoring human transmissions for years. He spoke of how humans were unpredictable, but creative. He said he admired how humans kept trying, even when impossible challenges stood in their way. The main representative quickly cut the transmission, but the moment had already happened. Humanity now knew that not all members of the Empire saw them as a threat. Some saw them as something new and fascinating. Inside the command ship, a quiet smile appeared on some faces. Even the strictest officers felt a spark of hope that the Empire's main representative didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful. He understood now that humanity was not just a risky species. They were something different, something the Empire didn't fully know how to categorize. For the first time, he asked a question with genuine interest. What does humanity want? Not what they planned, not what they built, not what they could offer. He asked what they wanted. This question was more important than the warning itself. It meant the Empire was willing to hear their intentions. The human fleet responded with honesty. They wanted safe space to grow. They wanted peaceful exploration. They wanted fair communication with other civilizations. They wanted to learn, to trade, to share knowledge, and to create a future where their children could look at the stars without fear. There was another long silence. It felt like the whole galaxy was holding its breath. Then the Empire did something new. One expected. Their ships slowly backed away, not in retreat, but in respect. It was a symbolic move. They widened the space between the fleets. A gesture that said, "We are not here to corner you." For a civilization known for strict control, this movement spoke louder than any words. The representative appeared again. His voice was firm, but now without coldness. He said the Empire needed time to consider humanity's request. He said they would gather their councils, discuss the matter, and return with a final decision. He did not repeat the warning. He did not threaten. He did not demand retreat. He simply said, "We will speak again." And then something else happened that no one saw coming. A light flashed from one of the Empire ships. A symbol appeared in the air, a glowing mark made of intersecting lines. Humans had never seen it before, but their translation systems quickly explained it. It was a sign of temporary neutrality. The Empire rarely used it. It meant no hostility, no enforcement. Discussion in progress. The representative vanished. The Empire's ships turned slowly, drifting away from the meeting point, but not leaving the region entirely. They were watching. They were thinking. They were reconsidering. Inside the human command ship. Everyone finally allowed themselves to breathe. They had come face to face with one of the oldest powers in the galaxy, and they had not bowed, broken, or lost their confidence. The meeting was not over. The final decision was still ahead. But humanity had already changed something subtle but powerful. They had made the Empire pause. They had made the Empire listen. And in the quiet space near the dying red star, the human fleet waited with steady hearts, ready for whatever came next. The warning from the Empire had been loud, but the message from humanity had been even louder. Still, no one in the fleet expected what happened after the first direct conversation between the Emperor and the human captain. That single moment changed the entire balance of the galaxy. It broke the old rules that the Empire had followed for centuries. It also opened a door that no one on the human side had asked for. But now they had to walk through it. In the following days, the crew noticed a strange silence from the Empire. Their patrol ships stopped circling. The giant war cruisers that had been sitting just beyond the border no longer moved closer. They stayed still, watching from the distance like hunters who suddenly weren't sure if their prey could bite back. The fleet officers kept studying every incoming signal, waiting for signs of attack. But what came instead was something completely different. The Empire sent a message requesting a diplomatic meeting. Not a warning, not a threat, a meeting. Everyone on the bridge stared at the message for several seconds because no one could believe it. The Empire had a history of demanding, not requesting. They ordered planets to surrender. They commanded systems to obey. But now they were asking God the Captain read the message twice before saying anything. He didn't smile. He didn't look proud. He simply breathed out slowly and said that humanity didn't have a choice but to accept. Not accepting would be seen as a sign of fear. Accepting it was a sign of courage. And courage, more than anything, was what humanity had been trying to show. But not everyone on the ship agreed. Many felt that the Empire was planning something. It felt too sudden, too smooth, too polite. Some officers whispered that the Empire wanted to lure the fleet into a controlled area. Some thought they might try to trap the captain. Others believed the Empire simply wanted to measure humanity more accurately before deciding whether to fight or not. The captain listened to all opinions before he answered. He always did that. He believed no voice on the ship should be ignored. After everyone had spoken, he stood up and told them the truth in simple words. He said that every great risk humanity had taken in space had started with a moment like this. And if they had stayed safe, stayed quiet, stayed small, then they would never have survived long enough to join the galactic stage. He said they didn't cross the stars just to hide. The crew understood. They didn't have to like the plan, but they understood it. Humanity had reached this strange point in the galaxy, not by being silent, but by being bold. So they prepared for the meeting. They studied the Empire's customs. They practiced responses. They trained for possible betrayal. They strengthened every defense system on the flagship until the ship felt like a fortress. When the day of the meeting arrived, the energy in the air felt heavy. Even the large viewing windows seemed darker, like space itself was holding its breath. The fleet traveled to neutral territory, a place where no Empire ships were allowed to fire and no human ship could attack without being scanned by dozens of security units. The station where the meeting was held floated quietly in space, shaped like a giant ring with a glowing blue center. It was old, older than both humanity and the Empire, built by some forgotten civilization that had vanished long before either side existed. The captain entered the station with his escort team. They moved slowly, checking every corner, scanning every doorway. The Empire's representatives waited ahead, standing tall in their long silver armor. Their helmets were thin and curved, hiding their faces. They looked like statues more than living beings. The first moment was tense. Neither side moved. Neither side spoke. It felt like the whole room might crack from the weight of silent mistrust. Then the captain stepped forward and greeted them with clear, calm words. The Empire's lead representative lifted their helmets slightly in response. Even that small gesture was shocking. Empire officers were known for their arrogance. They never lowered their guard. But here they were, showing something that looked almost like respect. They walked together into the meeting chamber. It was large, cold, and filled with strange symbols on the walls. Lights glowed from the ceiling in long spirals. The table in the center was made of a single piece of dark material that looked like polished stone. The discussion began. The Empire started by repeating their original warning, reminding humanity that they were newcomers in the galaxy, that they were young, that they were supposed to be weak. The captain didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply asked why the Empire was so afraid of a species they considered weak. The question hit the room like a shock wave. The Empire's representatives froze for a moment. They hadn't expected direct words. They weren't used to being confronted with their own fear. Their silence told the humans everything. It confirmed that the Empire was afraid, not of humanity's weapons, not of their ships, but of their spirit. The captain explained that humanity had survived storms that wiped out cities. disasters that shattered whole continents, and wars that nearly broke their world. And every time, humans rebuilt. They adapted. They learned. They grew stronger. They didn't rise because they were powerful. They rose because they refused to give up. The Empire already knew this. That was the real reason behind the warning. They weren't worried about the present. They were worried about the future. They saw what humanity could become. They saw how humans spread hope wherever they traveled. And hope was something the Empire struggled to control. The room grew warmer as the conversation continued. What started as a tense exchange slowly turned into something quieter, something almost honest. The Empire confessed that many within their ranks wanted peace, but didn't know how to ask for it without appearing weak. Some feared losing control. Others feared that humanity might one day challenge their dominance openly. The captain listened patiently, and for the first time in the meeting, he leaned back slightly and spoke with a softer tone. He explained that humanity didn't cross the stars to conquer anyone. They didn't want to rule. They didn't want to replace. They wanted to explore, learn, and grow. They wanted to share knowledge, not steal it. But he also made something very clear. Humanity would never kneel. They would never bow to threats. They would never silence their curiosity or their courage. If the Empire forced conflict, humanity would defend itself, not because it wanted war, but because it wanted to live free. The Empire's representatives exchanged looks, silent but thoughtful. They had never met a species that spoke so openly. Most worlds they conquered either begged for mercy or tried to deceive them. Humanity was different, direct, honest, impossible to intimidate. What happened next changed everything. The Empire's representative asked a question that the crew back on the flagship never expected to hear. They asked what kind of relationship humanity wanted with the Empire. Not under, not over, but with. That single question meant the Empire was finally willing to drop their superiority and talk as equals. The captain answered that humanity wanted cooperation, not domination. They wanted mutual respect, shared knowledge, shared peace. He said that the galaxy was big enough for all species to rise without stepping on each other. He also said that if the Empire chose peace, humanity would stand beside them, not against them. The meeting ended with no shouting, no threats, no last-minute attempts at control. It ended with silence, gentle and thoughtful. Both sides understood that this was not the end, but the beginning of a difficult, slow process. Peace wasn't a switch. It was a path, a long one, and both sides needed to walk it carefully. When the captain returned to the flagship, the crew watched him closely. They wanted to know if the Empire had agreed to anything. He looked tired, but he also looked hopeful. He explained everything honestly, every detail, every word. The crew listened without interrupting. When he finished, the room felt lighter. The Empire didn't promise peace, and humanity didn't expect them to. But they promised something just as important. They promised to think, to consider, to discuss, to slow down their aggression, to allow space for understanding. The galaxy wasn't safe yet. The Empire still held power. Tension still floated in the air. But the first wall had cracked. The first door had opened. And that was more progress than anyone had imagined possible. That night, the captain walked alone to the observation window. Stars shined across the dark sky like dust on black glass. He felt the weight of the future settling on his shoulders. Humanity had stepped into history that day, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as equals. The next chapters of this story would not be simple. They would not be peaceful. They would not be predictable. But they would be human. And that was enough. The station meeting ended, but the real test began after it. Peace was not guaranteed. In fact, the days following the meeting were were some of the hardest for the human fleet. Everyone expected the Empire to make a move, either good or bad. Maybe they would pull back. Maybe they would strike while humanity felt hopeful. No one knew, and that unknown feeling made the air heavy across the entire fleet. The captain spent most of his time walking the ship. Instead of sitting in his command chair, he believed leaders had to be seen, especially in moments when fear tried to take over. He talked to engineers who hadn't slept properly in days. He spoke with young crew members who had secretly packed their bags in case evacuation orders came. He visited the medical bay, where a few injured workers from earlier repairs rested. He didn't give them empty promises. He simply told them that whatever happened next, humanity would face it together. The crew needed that. They didn't want perfect words. They wanted honesty. Outside the ship, space looked peaceful, but everyone knew peace in space could be fake. The Empire's ships kept their distance, leaving a silent ring around the region. They didn't advance, and they didn't retreat. They just watched, like predators studying another predator. The human fleet stayed alert. Every system stayed powered. Every weapon stayed charged. The galaxy held its breath. 3 days after the meeting, something unexpected happened. A single Empire ship approached the human flagship. It did not activate its weapons. It did not hide behind stealth. It came openly, slowly, almost respectfully. The crew prepared defense systems, but the ship stopped just outside firing range and sent a message requesting permission to speak. The captain agreed. The screen lit up, showing an Empire officer wearing deep blue armor instead of the usual silver. Blue armor meant high rank, but not military. It meant political authority, someone who had a voice in the Emperor's council. The crew stood straighter. This wasn't a threat. This was something else, Dot. The officer said the Emperor had studied the meeting recordings. The Emperor wanted time to consider a new path. But while the council debated, there were forces inside the Empire who completely hated the idea of peace. To them, humanity was unpredictable, uncontrolled, and impossible to scare. They felt threatened. Those groups were planning something dangerous. The officer warned the captain that these groups wanted to attack the human fleet without permission from the Emperor. A rogue strike. A secret mission. If that happened, the Empire would deny responsibility. War would begin instantly, and the galaxy would burn. The moment the message ended, the room went silent. Every crew member could feel the seriousness of the situation. This wasn't a simple warning like before. This was real danger, and it was coming fast. The captain acted immediately. He ordered the fleet to shift positions, not to run, but to avoid being surrounded. He told the engineers to strengthen the shields. He told the sensor teams to scan for any hidden movements. But he refused to fire first. He said that if humanity shot the first beam, the Empire would use it as proof that humans were the real threat. The crew trusted him. They always did. But fear still crawled under their skin. Hours passed with no sign of attack. Then, without warning, multiple unidentified ships emerged from a dense shadow of space. They were Empire ships, but their identification signals were masked. This confirmed everything. Rogue units. The kind that didn't care about orders, only power. They moved quickly, targeting the human flagship with a formation shaped like a claw. Their engines glowed red, their weapons locked, and everyone on the human ship felt their heartbeat jump. Alarms filled the ship. Officers rushed into position. Every screen lit up with glowing red alert symbols. The sound of weapon systems powering up ran through the hallways. The captain stood at the center of the bridge, calm but focused. He ordered the crew to hold fire until he understood their exact intentions. But the rogue ships didn't wait. Their cannons lit up, and streams of energy shot toward the flagship. The first blast hit the shields, shaking the entire ship. Sparks flew from several panels. Officers grabbed onto their stations to steady themselves. But the ship held. The captain didn't hesitate anymore. He gave the order to defend. The human fleet moved fast. Smaller interceptors shot forward like arrows, creating a moving barrier between the flagship and the attackers. Larger ships formed protective circles. The sky filled with bright streaks from defensive fire. Every beam, every flash, every explosion shook the space around them. But something unusual happened. While the rogue ships fought fiercely, none of them targeted weaker human vessels. They only aimed for the flagship. They wanted to kill the captain. If the captain fell, the entire human fleet would lose its strongest voice for peace. That was their plan. The captain understood that instantly. And instead of hiding, he stepped closer to the command center. Retreating would give the rogue ships what they wanted. Standing firm forced them to face humanity at full strength. The enemy strike grew more aggressive. More hits slammed against the flagship. The shields weakened. One section flickered. But the crew didn't panic. They worked like a single heartbeat. The engineering team rerouted power. The defense team targeted weak points on the enemy ships. The communication team broadcast warnings to avoid further escalation. Then something unexpected changed the entire battle. A massive Empire war cruiser appeared out of hyperspace. But this cruiser didn't join the attack. It fired at the rogue ships. The crew stared in disbelief. The Empire had chosen to protect the human fleet. The cruiser sent a message announcing that the Emperor had declared the rogue attack illegal and dishonorable. Those who disobeyed the Emperor's order would face punishment, even if they belonged to the Empire. The rogue ships were stunned. Their movements became unorganized. In that moment of hesitation, the human fleet and the Imperial cruiser pushed them back. One by one, the rogue ships were disabled. Some were forced into retreat. Others powered down completely. The battle ended faster than anyone expected. The silence afterward felt unreal. The Emperor himself sent a final message. His voice was firm, but not hostile. He acknowledged the captain's courage. He admitted that the Empire had underestimated humanity, not in strength, but in spirit. He said the galaxy had no place for endless war, and that he wanted to begin a real path toward peace that wasn't friendship. Not yet, maybe not for years, but it was trust. A first step. The captain thanked him calmly, though everyone on the bridge could see the relief in his eyes. He didn't celebrate. He didn't cheer. He simply stood there quietly, letting the moment sink into history. Later, when the fleet finally got time to breathe, many crew members sat in groups and talked about what they had witnessed. Some laughed a little. Some cried from relief. Some just stared at the stars through the window, trying to understand how close they had come to something horrible. That night, the captain went again to the observation deck. He stood alone, watching distant galaxies shine across the dark horizon. He knew the journey wasn't over. Peace wasn't something you earned once. It was something you had to protect again and again. But humanity had sent its message, not with threats and not with fear, but with strength, honesty, and unity. And the galaxy heard it. He whispered to himself that no matter what challenges came next, humanity would face them the same way it always had. Together. Brave, determined, unbroken. The future was uncertain. But for the first time since entering Empire space, the future also felt possible. And that was enough.